Did you check the sound?
Sí.
Hello. Today, April the 4th. First of all, I like to pay tribute to Father Dan Barrigan, who passed away a few days ago. He was one of the most prominent religious and activist leader of the last 40-50 years in the United States with his followers. I hope his examples is followed by many more. After these few words, I may follow my previous talk about the new doctrines of the United States regarding the change of governments. I said how this evolved, and now I like to have a few words about their techniques. Those techniques were improved by the time through the experience, and of course they adapt to the circumstances. We have to keep in mind the techniques of the Solidarność in Poland through the church, and the uprising against the communists by Lech Walesa and his followers. Well, those things have been passed, but then came the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, and talking about the last ones, which is the Maidan in Ukraine, and it was after the Orange Revolution also in Ukraine that in a sense fails. But these techniques are polished through the experience and times. The first thing is to work with the students. Works in the university, especially with English professors who are very well trained to capture the ambitious young students, university students, who happen to speak perfect or very good English, and admire the United States, the American way of living, the so-called American way of living, and all those things. So they are invited through non-governmental organizations to work in, maybe from freedom of speech or human rights, all those things that are very easy to call their attentions. Since these young students, these university students, they are always ambitious, and they like to exert their leadership and prove themselves. are very easy targets. Once the students are organized and invited to embassy receptions or official receptions, then afterwards they are invited to visit Washington D.C. and things like that. So they are real unknown agents. And they don't know they are agents, but they are, and they work for the interest of the United States. In the case of Ukraine, they also been working with the shock troops. They realized that in Ukraine there were there were the tendencies and the reminders of the fascist, Nazist organizations that were operating in Ukraine during the Hitler's and Nazist era, and after the Second World War as well. Sometimes they were against, sometimes they were pro-Poland. But in the case of Ukraine, since Poland and Lithuania, they were the rulers for all in the past centuries in Ukraine. They have a strong support in the west of Ukraine. So the idea was to work with those groups as well, to have them a different type of regime change. This was a new type with using shock troops. And those were not university students, they were mainly unemployed youth or youth that were not very happy with their personal situation. Just very similar what happened in Germany in the 30s. They were the supporters of authoritarian regimes. And of course, since they were just influenced by those ideas, they reject the socialist and communist ideas of the Russians, just like in Nazi Germany in the 30s. But now, of course, lately, since the year 1991, Ukraine was independent republic for the first time. They were working under those lines, and of course, the other thing was to demonize the leadership and to divide the country. The leadership was the leader was Yanukovych, which was a let's say in a sense pro-Russian or pro-Eastern Ukraine, where it was his stronghold, political stronghold. So the idea was to change the regime by force. So they work, they organize, they invest a lot, like the Undersecretary Nuland said that they invest close to $5,000 billion in Ukraine for in a number of years towards achieving their purpose. And their purpose was to get closer to Russia. Well, the events that happened in Ukraine was very very strong, and the manifestation that and the shocks and the fights that happened in Ukraine could have never happened in the USA or another country in Europe, let's say the UK or perhaps Italy and Spain or France, much less in Germany. The security forces could have been very strong reprisal, but in the eastern countries they had the idea, the socialist idea, that the police, the interior troops, they should not be armed. So it's very easy to check that they had the same weapons like the protesters. Well, this was a very unusual type. It was almost a war, a civil war in what happened in Ukraine. Very similar things happened in Syria. And to divide the country, there need to have some blood spell. So sometimes they use snipers who kills both sides, and that is the starting point of a real bloody uprising. What happened in Maidan Squares is very well documented, and what happened in Syria as well. And then when those things happen, they have to blame the government. Always the government is the one who instigates those. I mean, it's not, but they blame the government as the instigators of those bloodshed. So these are the new techniques. Let's say in Brazil, they have the different techniques. It's a soft regime change. In Syria and Ukraine was some sort of hard and strong regime change with a blood spell. But in Brazil, like in Uruguay, in Honduras, there are different type of regime change. There are softer types, because there is no need such a strong actions, and those strong actions may always lead to some civil conflict. The United States is not interested to have, and of course the South American countries as well, they are not interested to have a civil war in any country of the region. But they have different techniques. In Paraguay, it was used the constitution as a coup. In Brazil, they're blaming the government, and they're using the legal and the impeachment of the president. And the idea is they are supported by the media, the local media, which is in the hands of the most powerful families in Brazil, and they are of course the most powerful families in Brazil and groups, and ruling the former rulers, political rulers, but they are the economical rulers as well at the present, because although in Brazil the government was progressive, didn't took over the economy, took over the control of the economy, the control of the bank, the control of the import-exports. And without the control of those key elements of the economy, the government is always hostage to the will of the operators in the economy, and of course in the media as well. So any government who wants to protect itself should have the control of the media, the control of the banks, the control of the import-export, and the control of the exchange rates. If they don't have any control on these matters, they most probably will be defeated. The next phase might be in Russia. In Russia might be a different and very difficult things to do at the present. But from the political point of view, they have in Russia the so-called fifth column. The fifth column is nothing more than the diffusion, anthropological diffusion of one culture into another. And after the collapse and capitulation of the ideological and political socialist system led by the Communist Party of the CSSR, in the 90s, in the last decade of the 20th century, it was sort of a brainwash on the part of the Russian population, especially in big cities like Moscow, the former Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and big countries, big cities. So the middle class that emerged, they were very much impressed with the American way of living, and in those years they changed the constitution, they changed the economic system, they changed the central bank almost is controlled by the Federal Reserve in a sense. So this is the parts which are very vulnerable to the Russians, and they will try to attack in those lines and to mobilize as much as they can the non-governmental organizations, which nowadays are under some sort of control, soft control, I may say. In Russia today the control is soft because they are surprisingly very concerned about the international opinions, but the international opinion is not very relevant for a country as Russia, which is such a huge country and huge and powerful and rich of resources and with a very able population. So in my view, I'm surprised about their dependence of the so-called international opinion. The international community, that's the word they employ nowadays. The international community is United States, UK, and I don't know, perhaps Israel or Canada or Australia. That's the international community. Germany too, Poland of course. in the case of Russia. The Baltic countries are natural adversaries. The Finnish are natural adversaries as well. So unless the political leadership of Russia throw a real strong red line, they'll be in some sort of conflict or troubles ahead. They will, and that's in the political sphere. In the military sphere, well, it reminds me in the Middle Age of the condottieri. The condottieri were the mercenary troops that were doing movements, a sort of movement without fighting. And now the NATO are moving their small units, because a brigade, 5,000, or have a rapid deployment for 40,000. That's from the military point of view is ridiculous against a country of almost 1 million armored force. It's ridiculous, grotesque, as I may say. Those they can never put some fear on the Russian armed forces. That's my impression. But having a stronghold in Ukraine, that's a different story, because Ukraine, whether it collapses or not, for the strategic point of view from the United States, is not very much relevant. As long as they can control the government in Kiev and try to be a sort of a danger in the southern flank of Russia, then of course they always will try in the Central Asia, in the Caucasus, in Georgia, Azerbaijan, in Moldova, and they are supported in Romania, and some support in I may say some support in Romania, or some support in Romania, and some support in Ukraine. But the population in Ukraine is, I think they're so confused, sort of in a state of anomia. I'm talking about the western part of Ukraine. And in the eastern part, Donetsk and Lugansk, Narodny Republic, my impression from the distance, because I am talking about places that they are so far away from here, I'm talking from Buenos Aires, but they hope to be supported by Russia. Some feel that they were betrayed. It's sort of an uncertain future, but the future of these areas, it all depends of the political will of the political leadership of Russia, no doubt. It all depends on Russia, whether those oblast or republics, whatever term you like to employ, may last or not. But my impression is they are forced to some arrangement with the central government, the political future in Russia is very doubtful, and if it remain frozen conflicts, we'll see what the future may bring to that region. But for the people, east or west, for the regular people, that's they are in a big problem, social problem, economical problem mainly, and the techniques that the United States is using are very clear. Now, they're using these soft techniques in Brazil, and probably they made not this present government, because this year will be a change of government in the USA, which is, although they claim there are two countries, two political parties, or might be another one, but there's always two faces of the same coin. And the power of the President of the United States is always limited, in a sense, limited by internal economic forces, the ones who hold the grip of the financial, they want to hold the control of the military complex and the health complex, insurance complex. Those are, and energy, of course, complex too. So that's where the power, the hidden power, the ghost government remains. And they control, with their lobbies, they control very easily the Congress. So the power of the President of the United States, although is great, but it's not total by any means. And this is the present situation from my point of view. I may add some words in the next video about the migration, the human migrations, some other problems, important problems. The Euro and the European Union, which is the future, but the big problem from my perspective is, no matter who gets the control, or who keeps the control, so far is the United States, is sort of political control, but the problems of the world are based on the system, the economic system, and of course the political system, which is related to this capitalist system. And there is no clear signs whether this might change in the future. We may see some sort of taken conscious of the problems in the United States. I mentioned Father Barrick, and I may mention great personalities like Chris Hedges, and then of the present, some others, Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, remarkable personalities, remarkable personalities. And in the political spectrum, Bernie Sanders would happen to call himself a socialist. Well, let's say he's a moderate, more than moderate Democrat, social democrats, but with the American flavor. I mean, there is nothing that resembles the social democracy that they have in Denmark or Norway or Sweden. And they are very far away from that idea. The UK and the United States are the former empire and the present empire are radical capitalist systems ruled by radical extreme rights. That reverberates in all the Western world, and of course in the Southeast Asia. They don't control China and they don't control Russia, and they would like to. For today, I'll leave it here. Thank you.